racing each other to be the furthest out, fastest in. Idiots, he thought. Why would they want to court life-altering injuries or even death by hurling themselves against nature at its angriest? What did they have to prove, to themselves or anyone else? What was lacking in their lives that drove them to do that? He didn't know, didn't want to speculate. Just knew that these people hadn't faced real horror in their lives, real danger. If they had, the last thing they would do was actively seek it out. He checked his watch, turned away from the cliff face, the surfers and their stupid death wishes dismissed. Time to go to work. The sailmaker's pub was all but empty. Sunday quiet. No roasts, no specials. No tourists ventured this way, especially out of season, so no point. Just a few daytime regulars, scattered and disparate, who would brave more than the storm outside to get their usual seat, their usual drink. Tom came through the front door, closed it behind him, thankful that the fire had already been built up. The regulars all looked at him. Some nodded, some went back to nursing their ails. He was still relatively new here. He understood that. St Petroc, to put it mildly, wasn't the kind of community that was immediately accommodating to those who weren't just passing through and spending money, but had decided to remain and settle amongst them. He didn't mind. Welcome brought with it enquiry and interference, and he didn't want either. That was one of the main reasons he had chosen the place. Hardly anyone came to St Petroc who didn't live there, and hardly anyone came to live there. It wasn't the kind of place where TV crews would make period or heartwarming drama. It had no celebrity chef taking over all the restaurants and bars in the village, of which there were scant few anyway, to tempt Londoners down for the weekend. No hippie capitalists had based an organic confectionery business there. No Eden Project. Very few holiday cottages. No second homers. He had come down the cliff path, walked through the town to get to the pub. Even in sunlight it looked bleak and depressing, on a day like this more than doubly so. It was a dying little village, shrinking all the time. Shop fronts were boarded up and locked, dusty flyers and bills stacked up and yellowing behind dirt and rust-encrusted letterboxes. Buildings weren't maintained, stone slab frontage green with mildew and algae, busted drain pipes and guttering giving heavy localised showers. Where nearby villages had turned amenity stores into tourist gift and craft shops, St Petroc had nothing. Old businesses were selling up and getting out. New businesses never lasted long. The hardware store became, optimistically, an artisanal bakery. The family butcher's, a coffee shop. Now they were nothing, as abandoned as the rest. About the only business remaining was the village grocery store, its shelves virtually bare, a pre-glasnost supermarket in miniature. The church stood lonely and weed-choked, its pews almost empty come Sunday, its spire pointing towards the sky like a raised middle finger. The bar of the sailmakers was dark, all old wooden beams, low ceilings, uneven floors. It was getting on for 300 years old, and no one really wanted to update it. The owners were holding their breath, hoping that tourists would think themselves the first to discover a cosy old hidden gem of an inn, and the locals just didn't like change on principle. It was supposed to have an authentic smuggler's tunnel leading from behind the bar down to one of the caves in the cliff face on the seafront. Tom couldn't testify whether that was real or an attempt at myth-making, but there was definitely some kind of hole in the wall behind the bar, too small for anyone but a child to get through, though. He crossed to the fire, took off his coat, water dripping off it. He shivered before the heat. "You walked here?" He turned. Pearl had heard the door, had come through from the back room to behind the bar, curious to see who would turn up in this weather. He shook out his coat one last time, dropped it on the floor, began warming his hands.